My daughter looked me dead in the eyes and said, "This house is ours now, not yours." Her voice was sharp, final, like she had already buried me while I was still standing in front of her. I didn't argue. I simply smiled. Because she didn't know the truth. The house she was trying to claim had already been signed away and not into her hands. Blood doesn't give you the right to steal dignity. A parent's sacrifice is not a prize to be taken, it's a bond meant to be honored. But she didn't know that one quiet signature, one piece of paper, signed just a week earlier, would turn her world upside down. She thought she had cornered me. She thought her words had power. But she had no idea I had already chosen my path, and it was a path she would never expect. Stay with me, because what happened next left my own daughter speechless. Subscribe now and tell me, what would you have done? I was not born into comfort. My story began in the cold winds of Maine, where winters cut through skin like knives and money never stretched far enough. I was a young mother then, barely more than a girl, left alone after my husband walked out. He left me with 2 children, a pile of unpaid bills, and a house that was nothing more than 4 rotting walls and a roof that leaked whenever it rained. I remember sitting at the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling as water dripped into a bucket. The sound was steady, mocking, drip, drip, drip. My children were asleep beside me, and I promised them silently that I would never let them lose their home. So I worked, and when work wasn't enough, I worked more. I took the morning shift at the diner, pouring coffee for men who barely looked me in the eye. The smell of bacon and grease clung to my uniform. My hands carried the sting of hot plates, my back ached from hours on my feet. In the evenings I scrubbed floors in office buildings, pushing a mop until my fingers cracked from bleach. Some nights when exhaustion pulled me down, I would whisper to myself, one more hour, one more paycheck, one more step closer. Every cent I earned I put into that house. Every crack in the wall I patched with my own hands. Every broken window I repaired with borrowed tools and stubborn will. That house wasn't just wood and stone, it was proof that I could survive, even when left abandoned. When my daughter was small, she used to tug at my apron and say, "Mom, this house is big, right? We'll never have to leave." And I would kneel, brush her hair out of her eyes, and tell her, "This house will always be your safe place." It became my mission, my sacrifice. I went hungry so they could eat. I wore second-hand coats so they could have new shoes. There were winters I couldn't afford heat, so I bundled them in blankets and told them it was an adventure. But I knew, deep down, that every scar of hardship would be worth it the day they stood tall, knowing they had a home. As years passed, the house transformed. The sagging roof stood firm again. The peeling paint was replaced with a warm yellow glow that caught the sun each morning. Flowers bloomed in the front yard, stubborn against the rocky Maine soil. Neighbors would say, "You've done well holding that place together." I didn't boast. I didn't explain. Because only I knew the nights I cried into a pillow, or the mornings when my body screamed against me. Every wall in that house carried my sweat, my tears, my sacrifices. It wasn't just a property, it was my soul poured into timber and brick. And yet, sacrifice has a cruel way of being forgotten. Children grow. They stop seeing the hands that built their comfort. They only see the walls around them, steady and unshaking, and assume it was always easy. My daughter, my sweet girl who once curled in my lap and whispered, "I'll take care of you, Mom, when I'm big," slowly changed. At first it was the way she talked about the house as ours instead of yours. The way she brought her friends over, parading rooms I had fought tooth and nail to restore. But then came the man. The one who whispered in her ear, the one who looked at my home, not as shelter but as profit. I saw it in his eyes the first night he stepped into my kitchen. His smile was too wide, his compliments too rehearsed. He ran his hand across the oak table I'd saved up years to buy, and I knew he wasn't admiring, he was calculating. I didn't say anything, not then, because a mother knows. A mother waits. But deep in my chest, something heavy began to stir, a question I had buried under decades of sacrifice. Would my own child choose me, or would she choose the weight of greed? I kept work, even when age slowed my steps, even when arthritis gnawed at my joints. I refused to let go. The house was still mine. My dignity was still mine. But the day she looked me in the eyes and said, "This house is ours now, not yours," I realized all those years of sacrifice had built not only a home but a battlefield. And I was not going to surrender, because here is the truth I had to learn the hard way. Sacrifice means nothing if it becomes an invitation for betrayal. Real family remembers your struggle. Fake family erases it the moment they see a chance to claim what you built. I didn't answer her then. I didn't shout or weep. I simply looked around at the walls I had patched, the floors I had polished, the garden I had planted. And I thought to myself, if she wants to play this game, let her. But she has no idea how far I am willing to go to protect what's mine. And so the woman who once poured coffee for pennies, who scrubbed floors until her knees bled, who raised children alone under the cruel Maine winters, began to plan. The sacrifices of the past had taught me one thing: endurance. And endurance, when pushed too far, turns into resolve. Resolve strong enough to turn betrayal into justice. She thought she could take the house from me, but she didn't know I had already placed a weapon in her own hands. And when the moment came, that very weapon would cut her down. I dropped the core truth in the first breath of this day. My daughter came to take the house, and she did not come alone. She arrived with certainty in her eyes and a man at her shoulder. A man who smelled like expensive cologne and easy promise. They stood in my doorway as if they owned the wind that pushed them inside. I had just set the kettle on. The burner ticked, then caught with a blue ring, and the winter air pulled through the old window over the sink. Steam rose, soft and white, like a ghost that didn't know it should be afraid. She said the line again as if saying it twice would make it true. "This house is ours now, not yours." Her voice didn't shake. Evan rested his hand on the doorframe, casual, like this had all been agreed. He let his eyes slide along the walls, slow and hungry. "Nice bones," he said, like a contractor, measuring profit, not a man standing in a family home. I breathed in the smell of pine cleaner and old wood. I remembered the nights I wiped these floors when my feet were too swollen to feel. I remembered holding my babies under quilts when we had no oil for the furnace, and pretending we were camping under stars. I did not answer her claim. I poured the boiling water over black tea and watched the color grow dark and on. Silence has weight when you let it sit on a table between you. She wouldn't let the silence live. She said the bank would be easier to handle if the title were in younger hands. She said I was getting older and needed less to worry about. She said we could modernize, refinance, maybe flip if the market looked good. Evan stepped forward with a folder, thick and cream-colored, the kind bought to make lies feel official. He placed it on the table where I served her birthdays and winters, and soup when money was thin. "Just some routine updates," he said. We had a notary in the car, quick and painless. I watched his fingers tap the folder, a dull rhythm on the wood I'd sanded myself. 3 taps, then a little smile like he could hear the register already ringing. I turned the mug so the handle faced her. "Take some tea," I said. "Maine is colder than pride." The steam curled up between us, and for a second her eyes softened, remembering when her hands were small and hungry for warmth. She pushed the mug away. "We don't have time for this," she said. Her rings clicked on the porcelain and sounded like keys that weren't hers. Evan lifted the top page. His tone was light, practiced, the kind men use when they want you to feel foolish for asking questions. "This one is a simple transfer to streamline insurance and taxes. No big deal." The attorney drew it up. "Everybody does this." I let my palm rest on the table. I could feel the tiny scars in the wood, the story of a life sanded and stained and made to shine again. I thought of the line I had promised myself to hold. "Do not shout, do not beg, do not bleed where they can see it." The kettle hissed a little louder as if it knew what was coming. Outside, a crow landed on the spruce and stared through the window, black eyes steady, like a witness called by winter. My heartbeat was slow, deliberate, like a clock that refuses to be rushed. I asked the question I had to ask. Why today? My voice did not tremble. Because efficiency, Evan said. Because opportunity. He laughed softly and looked around again. Your kind of place is charming to old folks, but a younger couple could make real money here. Open the kitchen. Knock down that wall. Get rid of the old smell. The old smell sits where love has cooked for years, he said. Like a stain. I watched my daughter swallow the words he fed her. She didn't look at me when she said it would be better for everyone. Better for everyone always means better for the one holding the pen. He slid the pen across the table. He tapped the signature line with a neat little nail. Just here, he said. We'll take it from there. I didn't touch the pen. I set down my tea and folded my hands. When people come to steal, they expect you to defend. They don't expect you to measure that, I said. Tell me about the debt. He blinked, then smiled like I had told a joke poorly. I said, tell me how much you already borrowed against your future, because I can smell interest on both of you. My daughter finally looked at me. Her cheeks flushed to a winter. We have plans, she said. We're building a life. Don't make this ugly. I held her gaze. Ugliness is what grows when gratitude dies. I let the words sink slow and heavy, the way frost sinks into the ground and stays. Evan shrugged. Look, we don't need to get personal. This is a practical step. You're not going to be here forever. He smiled like a man explaining gravity. Things pass down. It's natural. Things pass down, I said. When hands are clean. I stood and my chair's legs cried against the floor with that small, honest protest old wood made. I walked to the hutch and opened the top drawer where I keep envelopes and rubber bands, and what people assume are coupons. I took out a single sealed envelope with my daughter's name written in my slope-leaning hand. The paper whispered against my finger. I set it beside the folder Evan had brought. What's that? She said. Her voice had a new thread in it, uncertainty, thin and bright. The crow scratched the window frame like it wanted to say something too. I told her it was a little housekeeping we had done last week, just something she had signed in a hurry when she brought me those bakery muffins, and said she wanted to help. Insurance had asked me to have anyone staying under my roof sign a guest agreement, I said. For liability. For clarity. She frowned, searching her own memory, then waved a hand. That was just a basic form, she said. You said it was nothing. I let her hear herself. It was basic, I said. It was clear. The lawyer drafted it plain. It states that any adult staying here has no ownership claim, no tenancy rights, and can be asked to leave with notice at my discretion. Words can be small and still be sharp. Evan's smile thinned. He reached for the envelope like a man checking a trap. His fingers paused when he felt the weight inside. I did not pull it back. Go on, I said. Read. I leaned on the counter and let the tea kettle breathe in the space between us. He broke the seal. Paper rasped. His eyes moved fast, then slowed, then stopped. My daughter's voice was softer now. Why would you do that? She asked, as if I had surprised violence with a mirror. Because I learned, I said, that promises made over tea grow cold when money finds the door. Evan straightened the pages with neat little taps. This doesn't change title, he said. A bit too quick. This is just occupancy language. We can work around that. He pushed his folder closer, hunting for the next angle. He opened another tab and pulled out a fresh document, thicker, denser, with a small stamp in blue. Power of attorney, he said. Casual again. It lets us handle the boring parts for you. Banks, repairs, leases, whatever. You can rest. He smiled like rest was a candy he was gifting me. Power is never boring to the one taking it. I didn't touch the paper. I looked at my daughter, not the man. She kept her eyes on the table as if it might open and swallow her doubt. I spoke slowly, because truth should be delivered in full sentences. If you wanted to help, you would have asked what needed help. If you wanted to protect me, you would have asked what made me feel unsafe. You did neither. You planned to remove me from the decisions I bled for. She drew in breath, fast and hard, the way a wave draws pebbles before it breaks. You're making this dramatic, she said. We only want what's fair. Fair is a scale that breaks when greed sits on it. Evan's charm began to flake at the edges. He said people your age don't keep up with paperwork, and that's okay, that's why younger family steps in. Your kind of generation holds on to things too long, he said, as if love has an expiration date. The words your kind settled on the table like dust. Class always shows itself when money enters the room. I folded the guest agreement back into the envelope and slid it toward my daughter. Keep this, I said. You'll need to remember what you signed. My voice was calm as a January pond, frozen and clear. I turned the stove off and the flame vanished with a soft tick that sounded like a door quietly locking. Evan picked up the pen again and tried a different tone. Let's be reasonable. We can put your name first, and hers second. Optics can stay the same. He smiled without teeth now. Reasonable would have been you staying my child when money spoke. Reasonable would have been you asking how to share, not how to take. I let the quiet answer he sifted to threat masked as concern. What if something happens to you? He asked. This will be messy. Courts, probate, all that. We're trying to save everyone trouble. He slid the pen, one more inch, like a blade across a tablecloth. I said I had already met with a lawyer. I said my will was updated, clear and witnessed. I said paperwork isn't a fog to me, it's whether I learned to read. My daughter flinched, small but visible, like a candle seeing wind for the first time. You went to a lawyer without telling me, she said, as if the offense was secrecy, not survival. I let the accusation fall where it belonged, at the feet of the man who had taught her to take before asking. Evan started to gather his papers, less smooth now. We can reschedule the notary, he muttered. We'll circle back. He did not meet my eyes. I reached beneath the hutch and took out a small metal tin. It held old nails, 2 spare keys, and a matchbook from the diner where I used to work before my back learned the price of standing. I struck one match and watched the head bloom orange. Evan jerked. No need to be dramatic, he said again, his favorite defense against truth that rings. But drama is only noise. I was making a point. I held the match over a shallow ceramic dish and let it burn low until the heat reached my fingers. Then I blew it out and the smoke rose, thin and final. Some things, I said, don't return to what they were after fire touches them. My daughter whispered that she didn't recognize me. I told her she was just seeing the mother who built the house before she moved in with a man who wanted to gut it. Strength always looks like something new to the one who counted on your weakness. Evan glanced toward the door, then back at the folder, calculating exits and calls. He tried one last time, light and quick, like a thief checking the last window. We could at least list you as co-owner, he said. Optics, remember. Co-owner is the word thieves use when they need your name to open a lock. I pushed the folder back, one finger gentle but final. This house is not a debate, I said. It is my life's ledger written in wood, and your math doesn't work here. The crow outside called once, abrupt and bright. Some sounds cut through walls as if they were made of paper. Evan gathered his thing. He told my daughter they'd catch me in a better mood. She didn't move. Her eyes were wet and angry, like fresh ice over black water. She said I was turning my back on family. Family that tries to erase your name isn't family. It's a storm that thinks it lives here. I told her storms, houses stand. If the foundation is honest. I was done explaining dignity to people who didn't want to understand it.
No, that's the
They
new
left
one.
without finishing their tea.
Oh, very, very.
The door shut, heavy, and the house exhaled like it had held its breath while they were inside. I leaned on the counter and let the quiet come back like tide. I walked room to room, touching familiar things. The quilt folded at the end of the couch, the dent in the wall where a chair once slipped from my hands, the window latch that sticks unless you lift and press at the same time. Homes remember you the way children should. On the hallway shelf sat an old tin frame with a photo of my daughter at 7, gap-toothed and fearless, her arms thrown around my neck. I pressed my thumb to the glass and felt the cool truth of love is not a receipt you keep for proof, it's work you keep doing. I opened the back door and let the cold roll in. The spruce bent and whispered, and the crow flicked away, a slice of night against the day. In the yard, the compost lid rattled, and somewhere in the street a plow grumbled past. I thought of the form she signed last week, clear and plain. I thought of the will in my lawyer's drawer, precise as a winter. I thought of the next step, quiet and clean, the step they would never see coming. I set the matchbook back in the tin and returned it to its place. No fire needed today. Just patience. Paper stamped and lawful. Burns slower but cuts deep. Revenge is loud only to the one who receives it. To the one who prepares it. It is calm. I poured the cold tea down the sink and watched it swirl brown. And done. Then I filled the kettle again and set it back on the burner. The click. The flare. The steady blue. Some rituals belong to those who earned them. Before I sat, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart now. When my lawyer answered, I kept my voice steady. They came, I said. Bring the envelope tomorrow. We moved to the next step. I hung up and listened to the house settle. Old wood makes honest sounds. Pops and sighs that say I'm here, I'm holding. Outside the wind shifted. Colder and the spruce brushed the gutter in a slow, patient rhythm. If you have ever faced a child who chose a stranger's voice over your sacrifice, you know this feeling, heavy but clean. You know the place inside you, where grief and resolve shake hands. You know that love can forgive, but dignity must be defended. If you're hearing my story and your hands are shaking, ask yourself this. When family asks you to sign away your roof, do you pick the pen, or do you pick your name? Tell me in the comments what you would protect first, your peace or your pride, because sometimes the two are the same thing dressed in different coats. And stay with me, because what I did next made them think they were winning. Right up until the moment the door they claimed swung open for someone else. At sunrise, a car I'd never seen before rolled up my driveway with a briefcase and a smile, and from that moment, every signature in this story started counting down. The morning after their visit, I sat at the kitchen table with the old lamp burning a yellow circle across the wood. Their folder was gone, but their words lingered like smoke in the walls. This house is ours now, not yours. I touched the envelope she had signed, the one Evan had brushed off as just occupancy. I felt the faint raised seal of the lawyer's stamp, real and heavy, and I whispered to myself, they think I am blind. They don't know I've been watching longer than they've been scheming. I started my investigation the way every mother starts, by paying attention to the small things they thought I couldn't see. The car payments that came late, the credit card offers piling in their mailbox, the way Evan bragged too much like a man trying to cover the holes in his own floorboards. I remembered his hand grazing along my kitchen counter, his eyes measuring square footage instead of memories. That wasn't admiration. That was hunger. I pulled the heavy box of documents from the closet, the one that smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. Inside were 30 years of deeds, receipts, wills, and insurance papers, stacked and bound with rubber bands gone brittle. I spread them across the table like a battlefield map. Every corner of this house was bought with sacrifice, and I had the paper trail to prove it. Not $1 of theirs had ever touched these walls. I made a list in my notebook, not of chores, not of groceries, of moves, quiet moves. Step 2, trace their debts. Step 3, build a plan that wouldn't just defend me. It would show them what it meant to underestimate the hands that built their childhood. The phone was cool against my ear when I called Mr. Green, my lawyer. He was old Maine stock, sharp-eyed, gray-haired, the kind of man who knew how to cut through nonsense with one sentence. When I told him what happened, he didn't gasp, didn't comfort. He said, "You've been smarter than she thinks. You hold more power than you realize." Those words sat warm in my chest like a coal. Power, not spite, not rage. Power. That night, the wind pressed against the windows like a reminder that Maine winters don't forgive weakness. I lit a single candle, its flame steady, and began sorting through the papers one by one. The scratch of my pen echoed in the silence. Line after line, I charted out my daughter's mistakes. Loans co-signed, bills unpaid, assets tangled with Evan's name. It was all there, written in black and white. They were drowning, and they thought my house was a lifeboat. But lifeboats don't belong to the ones who drill holes in them. I started walking to town more often. The grocer knew things. The postmistress knew more. In small towns, secrets float through the air like salt from the ocean. I learned they had defaulted on a business loan. I learned Evan had been turned away by 2 banks already. I learned they were desperate enough to see me as their last option. Desperation makes people blind, but it makes me sharper. As I slid the glass back into its frame, I thought about how fixing things is the truest symbol of survival. Every repair I made was proof that I could patch holes others left behind. This time, the thing broken wasn't wood or glass, it was true, and I intended to fix it in a way they would never forget. The weeks passed quietly. To them, it must have looked like I had backed down. I didn't argue, I didn't confront. I let them believe I was tired, worn, too old to fight. I smiled when they stopped by. I brewed tea. I asked about their plans with polite nods, watching the way Evan's mouth twitched when he thought he'd won. But every smile was a mask, every nod was time bought, and every cup of tea was another hour closer to the storm I was preparing. One night, as snow pressed against the house, I sat again with my papers. The guest agreement she had signed rested at the top of the pile. Beside it, my updated will, notarized and sealed. But the most important document was the one no one expected, a signed contract of sale, already in progress with a buyer who valued history more than profit. A man who wanted a quiet life in Maine, who respected the weight of a house, kept alive by one woman's hand. I had already shown him the garden, the beams, the heart of this place. He said, "This isn't just a house, it's a story," and I'd be honored to continue it. I signed nothing that day, but the seed was planted, and seeds, once planted, have a way of growing, even under snow. Still, my plan needed more than paperwork. It needed truth, exposure. Because revenge doesn't just protect, it teaches. So I began collecting proof of their debts, copies from the courthouse, records of late payment, a quiet stack of evidence that would stand taller than their arrogance. I slipped them into a folder marked household repairs. If they ever snooped, they'd think it was bills for plumbing and paint. They wouldn't realize it was a mirror waiting to be lifted to their face. Every step was deliberate. Every move was calm, because when you prepare revenge, you don't rush. You let it simmer. You let it gather weight. You let it become so undeniable that when the moment comes, silence alone will finish the job. And still, when I lay in bed at night, I thought of her as the little girl with the gap-toothed smile who once promised to take care of me. I thought of the blanket forts in the living room, the smell of crayons, the soft sound of her laugh. For a moment, grief would settle on me like frost. But then I remembered the words she spoke. Cold, practiced, not her own. This house is ours now, not yours. And I told myself again and again, sacrifice does not mean surrender. One evening, I walked past the mirror in the hallway and caught my own reflection. The lines were deeper now. Yes, but the eyes, they had not dimmed. They were sharper, clearer. I whispered to the glass, "You are not the victim here. You are the storm they didn't predict." When neighbors asked why I looked so calm, I only smiled. Because peace is the best disguise a fighter can wear. Inside, the plan was unfolding with precision. The deed secured, the will updated, the buyer waiting, the evidence stacked. And soon the moment would come when my daughter would realize she had built her schemes on sand, while I had built my revenge on stone. The night before it all began, I placed 2 envelopes on the kitchen table, one for my lawyer, one for my daughter, and I whispered into the silence, "By tomorrow only one of you will leave this house standing tall." The night I set the 2 envelopes on the kitchen table, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the old beams, sounded like anticipation. I had spent weeks in silence, watching, waiting, building my defense not with anger but with paper, patience and truth. And now the time had come to strike. The first move was simple. I called Mr. Green, my lawyer, and told him the buyer was ready. We set the signing date. The papers would be final within days. The house they believed was already theirs was slipping away legally and cleanly before they ever touched a pen. The second move was quieter. I walked down to the courthouse and filed the occupancy agreement my daughter had signed. Stamped, record permanent. Her own signature, her own hand, was now the very chain that barred her from claiming anything here. That irony was sweeter than any victory cry. But the third move, that was the strike that would shatter everything they thought they controlled. I waited until Sunday. They liked to parade themselves on Sundays, showing up with big plans and bigger words. Sure enough, that afternoon a car pulled into my driveway. Evan stepped out first, polished shoes crunching on gravel. My daughter followed, carrying her purse like it held the keys to my future. They didn't knock. They walked in as if they had already moved in. My daughter finally found her voice. "Mom, why are you doing this?" she whispered, as if betrayal hadn't already answered that question for her. I stood, slow and calm. "Because family doesn't take your roof," I said. "They build one beside you. You chose someone who wanted walls, not love, and walls can be sold." And the fifth move was the one they never saw coming. Just then, headlights cut across the window. A car door slammed. The buyer stepped in, briefcase in hand, his presence steady, respectful. "This is Mr. Alden," I said. "He'll be the new owner within days." "Your timing is unfortunate." Evan's face flushed dark red. "You can't do this," he barked. "You wouldn't sell to a stranger, but I already had." Signed, notarized, and sealed. The ink was drying as he spoke. The look on my daughter's face was not anger. It was shock, the kind of shock that comes when the ground you stand on crumbles beneath you. She looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Evan muttered threats about lawsuits, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew every move had been made within the law. Every step calculated, every door locked before he even reached it. I walked them to the door. The roast chicken still filled the air, warm and rich, but the taste in their mouths was bitter. At the threshold I said the line I had been holding for weeks. "Blood doesn't give you the right to steal dignity." And with that, I closed the door. The latch clicked, sharp and final. Evan's anger spilled in sharp whispers, his hands slicing through the air. My daughter's shoulders sagged, her purse dangling loose, her face pale in the fading light. They had walked in certain they owned the future. They walked out carrying nothing but their own shame. I sat back down at the table, poured myself tea, and let the steam rise, soft and forgiving. The papers lay stacked in front of me, proof that sacrifice, when pushed too far, becomes strength. And yet, even as victory warmed me, I knew this was not the end, because pride may bend, but greed does not break so easily. And when they came back as I knew they would not just face me. They would face the truth of themselves, revealed in front of every neighbor, every friend, every eye that once thought them honorable. The next time my daughter returned, she didn't come quietly. She came screaming, dragging the whole neighborhood into our war, and that was exactly what I had prepared for. They did not come quietly. They came with a moving truck huffing diesel into the cold, with cardboard boxes stacked like claims, with voices too loud for a Sunday morning. The sky over Maine was a hard white, sun blunted by thin cloud, and the wind off the bay smelled like salt and iron. Gravel crunched under their tires. Neighbors stepped onto porches, arms crossed inside wool sleeves. A dog barked once and fell silent, as if even animals understand when a line is about to be drawn. I stood on my porch with a thermos of tea, warming my hands. The rail was cold through my gloves. The spruce beside the door combed the wind, each needle whispering patience. Evan jumped down first. His coat was new leather. His eyes were old hunger. He clapped his hands at the movers and pointed to my front door like it was a mouth he had already paid to open. My daughter climbed out slower, chin lifted, lips pressed to a thin line. Her purse hung heavy on her arm. She didn't look at me at first. She looked at the house. "We're moving in today," Evan said. His voice bounced off clapboard and stone. He smiled at the neighbors as if this were a parade. The movers rolled a dolly toward the steps. The wheels clattered, dull and rude. My porch boards answered with a low warning groan. I didn't move. Behind my door, a single sheet of paper was taped at eye level. The first thing anyone would see if they tried the handle. It was crisp white, stamped dark blue, language neat and final. A car door closed across the street. The deputy stepped out, hat low against the wind, jacket zipped to the throat. He watched, patient, like tide. Mr. Satin stood beside him with his briefcase, quiet as always, eyes taking measure the way good men do, looking at care, not square footage. Our realtor hovered near, papers in a folder, scarf flapping like a flag of simple order. Evan shouted for the movers to keep going. My daughter finally met my eyes. She said it soft at first, then louder when the wind pulled it away. "We're coming home. This house is not your home," I said. My voice was calm enough to still the porch's shiver. Home belongs to those who honor it. She took the steps, 2 at a time, heat in her cheeks. Her rings flashed like small threats. She grabbed the doorknob. Her hand stopped on the paper. Her eyes skimmed the language she had helped write. With her own impatient pen. Guest only. No tenancy. No claim. Leave on notice. The blue stamp caught the light. The porch went quiet. Even the wind holding a breath. Evan tore the paper down and crumpled it. He threw it hard at my feet. "Stunts don't change title," he said. "We're done playing house." The deputy stepped forward. "Boots sure on old wood. Let's keep hands off posted notices," he said, voice steady, not unkind. "We've all read the filings." Evan laughed high and brittle. He jabbed a finger at the deputy. "This is a family matter," he said. "Not your kind of business." The deputy didn't blink. "Law is exactly my kind of business," he said. He turned his head just enough for the neighborhood to hear. My daughter swallowed. Her eyes shone, but not with tears. Anger's shine, not grief's. "Mom," she said, "can we please talk inside?" "No," I said. "Some doors don't open for disrespect." The wind tugged a curl from under my hat and laid it across my cheek like a warning ribbon. Evan flicked his hand toward the movers again. "Get that couch up," he snapped. He turned back to me and smiled empty. "You can watch if you want." The deputy raised a palm and the movers froze like they'd hit glass. He spoke their language. Contractor. Calm. Liability simple. "You're not crossing that threshold today, fellas. Not with what I've seen filed." A murmur rippled down the street. Mrs. Donnelly whispered to Miss Rue is behind a mitten. Snow dust blew from the eaves like flour. I set the thermos on the rail and opened the envelope I brought outside. 2 pages. Heavy. Copies for public eyes. I held them where the light would find each stamp. "This is the recorded occupancy agreement," I said. She signed it, and I filed it. "It limits her to courtesy, not claim." I lifted the second page. "This is the notice served last night by the deputy's office. Any attempt to enter without permission will be treated as trespass." Evan's jaw flexed. His smile peeled back enough to show the edge of his teeth. "You think paper scares me. Paper doesn't scare you," I said. "It stops you. Stopping you is all I came out here to do." He took a step toward me, breath thick with cologne, eyes cutting as if he could slice respect out of air. "People like you hold on to old junk because you've never had better," he said. "This place smells like your kind of cooking in stale years. Let someone who knows value take it." The words "your kind" fell heavy and dirty on fresh snow. A couple heads turned. The deputy's mouth thinned. A line drawn, "You only cross once." I didn't move. I let the insult sit where it belonged in the cold. "Some words show you more about the speaker than the target." I took out a small metal dish and set it on the railing. From my pocket I pulled a single match from the old matchbook I keep for truth-telling. Its head scratched, flared and steadied to a clean flamed point. I held up a photocopy of the power of attorney form they'd once dangled like a leash. A copy, not the world's only proof symbol. Not evidence. The flame touched the corner and the paper curled in on itself, black edge chasing white. The smell rose, hot ink, sweet paper and ash drifted down like gray snow into the dish. "I will never sign my life away," I said. "Not for convenience. Not for optics. Not for your profit." My daughter flinched at the heat. Her eyes flicked to the deputy, then to the neighbors, then back to me. "Don't do this in front of everyone," she said, voice thin. This is between us. You brought a truck, I said. You brought the street. You chose the stage. I chose the lighting. Mr. Alden stepped forward just enough to be seen. His coat was plain, his hands bare and careful. He nodded to my daughter as one nods to a stranger one wishes no harm. There's no cruelty here, he said, tone even as a level. Only law and respect for the woman who kept this structure standing. I intend to preserve what she built. Evans snorted. Preserve, he said. He flicked a hand at the facade. Tear this box open and it could be something. Houses aren't boxes, I said. They are promises you keep or break every day you live under them. I let the words sit where the neighborhood could pick them up and take them home. The deputy opened his leather portfolio and read in a voice that carried without shouting. Names, dates, filing number. He folded it closed with a soft, authoritative click. You've been notified, he said to my daughter and to Evan. Without giving him the dignity of a separate look, any attempt to enter will be considered trespass. Any disturbance today becomes a charge. I suggest you step off the porch. Evan took the last step that wasn't his. The deputy's hand rose. A pause. A point. That single finger held more gravity than all of Evan's noise. My daughter's bravado cracked. She looked to the movers, to the truck, to the neighbors who would take this story into kitchens and phones and the thin local paper that still prints names. She lowered her foot and stepped down. I pulled one more document from the envelope and held it with 2 fingers only, like something that had already lost the right to be kept whole. A fake transfer Evan had drafted to make me feel small, no stamp, no witness, no lie. I tore it once, twice, 3 times, the sound sharp as ice breaking on a pond. The scraps went into the burning dish. They curled to nothing cleanly. My hands did not shake. My daughter's voice finally broke low. Why are you choosing a stranger over your family? Family does not ask you to vanish from your own table, I said. Family brings a chair and sets a plate. I will not feed someone who steals the bowl. Evan tried one last angle, teeth back behind a grin that didn't reach his eye. She's confused, he said to the crowd, to the deputy, to anyone who'd lend him an ear. She's old, set in her ways. We know what's best. Respect does not age, I said. And I am not confused. I am finished being used. My words did not rise. They fell final like a hammer finding its nail. The movers shifted on their feet and rolled the dolly backward, metal wheels thumping off the first, then the second step. One of them nodded to me. Small, decent, the way working men mark a boundary someone else failed to see. Diesel sighed from the truck like relief. Miss Donnelly coughed into her scarf and called out the line the whole street would repeat later. Real family respects you, not just your money. It was the truth turned into a little banner carried by ordinary voice. Evan cursed under his breath, then louder when he realized his quiet words died in the cold. He pointed at the deputy, then at Mr. Alden, then at me, trying to find a surface his anger would stick to. Nothing took. My daughter stepped forward one last time. She looked at me the way tide looks at rocks, knowing it cannot move what has learned to stand. Please, she said. Let us talk alone. We will talk, I said. When alone means no one standing behind your voice. We will talk when your first word is sorry and your second word is how. Until then, we stand out here where you chose to bring your noise. The wind braided a strand of her hair across her mouth. She didn't push it away. For a second she looked like the child in the photo on my hall shelf, lost, stubborn, not yet unkind. Evan grabbed her arm and tugged. His fingers were tight, knuckles pale. Come on, he said, to save face. We don't need this. She pulled free. No, she said, so small it could have been mine. He stared like he'd never heard her voice without his echo in it. Mr. Alden cleared his throat with the gentle courtesy of a man who has something to say and refuses to shout. He held out an envelope for my daughter, a copy of the sales timeline, inspection, closing date, and his number should she ever wish to speak with respect. Present. She took it with fingers that had run out of places to point. I unscrewed the thermos lid and poured tea into the small cup I keep inside. Steam rose in a thin white column, and the heat kissed my face. I offered the cup to the deputy first because order deserves warmth. He shook his head with a small, thankful smile. I offered it to my daughter. She didn't reach. If you've been listening to this and your own hands are tight, breathe with me for a moment. Ask yourself, would you forgive here, or would you finish the lesson? Tell me in the comments what you'd protect first, peace or pride, because sometimes they are the same thing in different coats. The deputy nudged the paper ball Evan had thrown with the toe of his boot. He pointed at the end of the walk. "You're done here today," he said. Evan stood too long in his own pride. Then he spun on his heel and stomped toward the truck, muttering about lawyers whose names he did not know. He climbed in and slammed the door hard enough to make the mirrors tremble. My daughter lingered at the bottom step, twist of snow at her boots, eyes trapped between me and the house, and the stranger who would keep it standing. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again and let out only white breath. Then she turned and walked to the passenger side, not looking back. The truck coughed, then found its voice. It reversed slowly, tires chewing the street, and rolled away past faces that did not hide what they felt. Silence followed like a benediction. I stood still until the diesel faded. The deputy tipped his hat and crossed back to his car. Mr. Alden waited for my nod before stepping onto the porch. We signed nothing on the planks. We spoke softly, as you do in a church you built with your own hand. He said he would honor the bones, keep the color, listen to the house before moving anything. I believed him. Some men use the word preserve and mean polish for profit. He meant care. He looked past me, inside like a person greeting an elder. I opened the door for him, and the house exhaled warmth into the cold. Scents rolled out: pine cleaner, roast chicken, the cotton sun smell of quilts. Light ran across the old floor, bright as if the boards remembered how to shine for a gentle step. I walked through each room one more time. My fingers kissed door frames, found the nick in the baseboard where a chair once slipped, pressed the window latch I'd learned to lift and press at the same time. Houses hold your fingerprints longer than photographs. In the back room, the fixed pane gave a clear view of the yard where snow had crusted thin as sugar. I touched the glass and felt the cool truth of what I had done. Fixing is love with a spine. I folded one quilt and set it at the end of the couch for Mr. Alden's first night. I placed a jar of matches on the mantel, not for burning but as a promise, light if needed, never for fear. I tucked the guest agreement copy into a labeled folder in the hutch, and closed the drawer with a final small click. In the kitchen I rinsed the little metal dish and set it to dry. Ash washed away in gray ribbons. The air was quieter, cleaner. I stood at the threshold with the keys in my palm, their teeth warm from my skin. Outside, neighbors drifted back into their doorways. A gull wheeled a hard line across the white sky and vanished behind rooftops. Mr. Alden held out his hand, not grabbing, not reaching past the pace of trust. I set the keys in his palm and curled his fingers around them gently. His eyes shone the way decent eyes shine when they're handed stewardship, not power. "Thank you," he said. He looked past me into the rooms. "I'll take care." Take care is different from take. It is a vow you can hear. I stepped off the porch for the first time as someone who did not own that house anymore. The ground felt level. My breath felt like it finally belonged to me again. At the gate I took. The yellow paint had kept its warmth even under winter's hand. The spruce shook itself like a dog after rain. I spoke quietly to the house so only it could hear. "You kept us when no one else did. Now let someone keep you the same way." My bag sat on the front seat of my car, packed yesterday with what matters when you stop proving and start living. A framed photo, 2 sweaters, 1 cast iron skillet, a small jar of seeds I would press into spring somewhere new. I closed the latch hummed the humble song of doors that have been shut 1,000 times without slamming. If you think victory always feels loud, it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like a quiet car warming under your hands, like breath that doesn't hitch, like a road you don't have to defend. I looked once in the mirror. The woman looking back did not need a house to prove she had a home inside her bones. Respect is the rent love pays. I shifted into drive. I followed the road east until the smell of salt grew thicker than memory, and the door I opened next did not creak, did not argue, did not demand proof. It simply let me in and waited for the life I was finally ready to start. The first morning in my new home by the coast, the air smelled different, not of old wood and years of labor, but of salt and possibility. The sun climbed over the horizon like it had been waiting just for me, and the gulls called sharp and clear as if to announce my arrival. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, a narrow porch, shingles weathered to a soft gray, but it stood with dignity facing the ocean, breathing in tide and wind. I placed my hand on the rail and felt it steady beneath me. Sometimes peace doesn't roar in, it waits quietly until you finally make room. The rooms were simple, unburdened. White curtains stirred in the breeze from cracked windows, carrying in the scent of seaweed and pine. The floor creaked, but not from age. It creaked like it wanted to greet me, to say you're safe here. I unpacked slowly, not out of exhaustion but because every item deserved care. The skillet that had seen 1,000 meals, the framed photo of my children when they were still small and untouched by greed, a quilt patched but sturdy folded neatly at the end of the bed. This wasn't just moving in, this was claiming peace. A fisherman with lines etched deep into his face brought me cod fresh from the water. A woman with flour still dusted across her apron left a loaf of bread on my step. No one asked about my daughter. No one asked why I left. They just said welcome. We're glad you're here. It struck me then how community is built, not on blood but on respect freely given. How kindness from strangers can sometimes feel more like family than words from your own child. The rocks were slick with moss, gulls picking through seaweed, the water cold and biting at my boots. I bent down and picked up a broken shell, edges worn smooth by the tide. It was once jagged, dangerous to hold. Now it was softened, reshaped, and beautiful. I slipped it into my pocket. That shell was me. There were nights grief tried to press back in. I'd sit at the small table, listening to the clock tick, and wonder where I went wrong, how a daughter raised on sacrifice could forget the taste of hunger I had swallowed for her. But each time, I reminded myself, betrayal is not my fault. Greed grows where gratitude dies, and that garden was not mine to tend. I had done my part. I had given, built, endured. The rest was her choice, and her consequence. I planted flowers outside the porch, marigolds, lavender, a few roses though the soil fought me. The first green shoots broke through dark earth like stubborn promises. I watered them with a steady hand, whispering, grow the way I had to against all odds. Every petal that opened was a kind of forgiveness, not for her but for myself. That one afternoon, I sat on the porch with tea, watching the sea glitter silver. A neighbor, an older man with kind eyes, sat with me. He looked at me, then at the horizon, and said quietly, you lost a house, but you found freedom. His words settled deep, because he was right. That old house had been my fortress, my burden, my battlefield. This new one was my release. Whispers of my daughter and Evan, debts unpaid, creditors circling, their life unraveling thread by thread. Neighbors repeated it with knowing glances, waiting for me to gloat. But I didn't, because revenge was never about leaving them ruined. It was about protecting myself. Justice was served the moment I walked out of that yellow house, with my dignity intact. What came after was their own doing, and I had no space left in my heart for bitterness. The ocean taught me something the house never could. It taught me rhythm. Waves rise, waves fall. They crash hard, but always pull back, making space for stillness. Pain is the same. It arrives fierce, but if you let it, it retreats. I began to breathe with the tide. Each inhale, release. Each exhale, peace. Shaky, uneven, not the confident strokes she used when she demanded what wasn't hers. I sat with it for hours before opening it. The paper was thin, the words thinner. She said she was sorry. She said she had been blinded. She said Evan had left when the money dried up. And at the end, she asked, can I come see you? I closed my eyes and let the silence answer first. The waves outside struck rock, steady and sure. Then I whispered to the empty room, not yet. Forgiveness is not denial. It is timing, and her time had not yet come. Weeks later, I saw her on the street by chance. She looked smaller somehow, as if life had taken back the pride she once carried like armor. She saw me. She froze. Her lips moved. shaping a word I couldn't hear. I didn't stop. I kept walking. Some doors are better left unopened until both sides know how to knock. At night, I sometimes still dream of the yellow house, the creak of its stairs, the soft hum of the furnace when it worked, the garden stubborn against stone. But in the dream, I'm not standing inside it anymore. I'm watching from the road, smiling as someone else tends its flowers, and I wake not with sorrow, but with peace, because I know I left it stronger than I found it, and I left myself stronger too. They build one beside you. Respect, not blood, is what makes a home. That is what I carry now. That is what I leave with you. But then came the letter that changed everything. Not from her, but from someone I never expected. If you've stayed with me through this story, then you already know the truth. I learned the hardest way of all. Blood may tie us, but respect is what keeps us bound. Family is not the one who demands what you built. Family is the one who stands beside you while you build it. Because in the end, blood gives you relation, but only respect makes you family. So I ask you, listener, if your own child looked you in the eye and tried to take your home, the very roof you sacrificed decades for, what would you do? Would you hand it over in silence, or would you stand tall and protect your dignity, even if it meant standing alone? Tell me in the comments, because your voice matters here. Share this story with someone who has given too much and needs to remember that sacrifice deserves honor, not theft. And if you believe dignity is worth more than money, then subscribe, because more true stories are waiting. Stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and justice. Stories that prove respect is the only inheritance worth leaving behind.